Greetings, greetings. So, yeah, haven't been on this screen too, because there's lots of work to do. So, just today, just a reflection, something for folks, particularly young people, but all of us to consider is do you have the desire to be controlled? Do you have the desire to put your life and your critical thinking into someone's hands? I can acknowledge that we've come up with a lot of programming, a lot of religious programming. A lot of us, whether it was Pentecostal or Baptist or whatever, we were all sold this program of put it all in the Lord's hands, and now with the New Age and the conscious folks, and it's put it in the universe's hands. So within that formula, there's no accountability and no responsibility, which has has actions attached to it. So, we're not really encouraged to critically think. And as we sit back and watch, I said to my sister a long time ago that all of this stuff that is coming to the surface within our community is an opportunity for us to assess and to correct, to add some corrective action. So between the scamming, not new, pedophilia, deviant behaviors in particular that manipulate the unaware and children who are not of a mature thought process, the irresponsibility and the lack of accountability for children that have been parented. There's so much the looking at the behaviors that are behind all of the priests and the folks with titles. All of this is an opportunity for us to see, and instead of merely being entertained by all of this, the cults and the scamming stuff, which is not new, it's an opportunity. It has come so to the surface as an opportunity for us to assess and to apply some corrective action, for us to strengthen and develop our muscles of critical thinking, and that will require us to think outside the box. Many of us are trained to desire to be controlled, and for some basic reasons. And I've noticed patterns, and I think patterns are really important because it's so easy. It's not hard to program people. This is something that I can accept, just like farm animals. Even though we can brag and boast and we study so much and we like to think that we're so smart, it's not hard to manipulate people. And there are folks that have a vested interest in understanding human psychology on a grand, larger scale, systemically, as well as low-level hood pimps and predators. And when we're younger, we don't have a language or a frame of reference to distinguish these things and point them out. So by the time we get hip to a lot of the psychological games and the manipulation between the teens and the 20s, quite often folks are left with a lot of damage. So it's something for us to look at, especially many of us who are entertained by all of these cults or just watching it. Are folks watching so that we can see these patterns in our own lives? Or do folks think that it's different if you belong to a church or not my mosque or not my synagogue? This stuff is happening on so many levels. Whether it's R. Kelly, whether it's a male, whether it's a female, all of this stuff has come to the surface as an opportunity for us to assess and to do something different. Many of us don't want to not be accepted by the group, and this is human beings in general, because we have such a natural desire to you want to fit in. So you want a sisterhood, or you want friends, you want attention, especially as women. Men, you want to be accepted by the group, and you want to be praised for your physical prowess. A lot of things that are natural and innate are manipulated. We're easily manipulated, and this may be something that many of us may not want to admit as we're looking at this younger generation, because this younger generation of all these folks heading over to the tropics, it's not massive numbers, but it's really speaking to the state that our young people are in. I heard someone say that folks have to really be in a really sad state or feeling so desperate, I would say, to risk, with all the warnings and the information that's out, to go over to another country when there's so much questionable stuff about all of these folks, their character and distinction, not cross-referencing, not cross-referencing, not going from what the person online is saying, but not taking the time to cross-reference people's character and their behavior, and just take people at they're saying the things that we want to hear. So a lot of us have a desire, and particularly young people, but it's not limited to folks in their teens and their 20s. There are many women that, as I'm watching some of these patterns, it's like I'm just watching the patterns, and I really feel for some of these women. But out of desperation for just wanting to be in a relationship, are opening themselves up to folks with a sketchy history. Again, some big red flags. If someone is not taking care of their children, if they have unresolved issues in a relationship, if they're not being responsible in terms of taking care of themselves, if anybody's complaining about their husband, wife, mate to somebody else, with it's one-sided. I know for women, it should be something that is, it's a red flag, right? Because you can't cross-reference, and you have to wonder what people's motivations are for telling you these stories. We're easily manipulated with stories. Marketers know this all the time to sell products. I used to work for a company. The whole thing is the story. I just had a communication with somebody today. The power of a story, the power of the story of the virgin birth. Stories. It's easy to get people entranced with a story, even if people know that the story sounds ridiculous, right? This con artist, Joseph Robinson, some of the stories he was saying was so ridiculous, but most people in the room are enamored by the story, never cross-references the story, and folks are just lulled to sleep. So it's not meant to be an insult, but it's just not hard. It's not hard to manipulate people. So do you have the need to be controlled? There's a competition for space, and this is not limited to quote unquote white supremacy. It's not limited to the color. There's a competition. As soon as you're out of one camp, religion or something new age, then there's the new camp. Space and the allegiance of your mind, of who you will follow with, who you give your money to, who you will give your creativity to. So and unfortunately, or just that is not limited. That's coming even from within our own community. So a lot of these things we don't want to look at, because all of the words and the context of the words are constantly being twisted. So in terms of, for example, culture, and I invite people, males and females, but especially females, to look up female genital mutilation and look at some of the videos of women that are performing female genital mutilation in Africa, because we romanticize Africa so much. And there's a reason why, because we're reaching back because of the trauma that as a collective, many of us have had inside of the United States, and a lot of that generational trauma being passed on. But as we look at female genital mutilation, you have to wonder, who were the first women to take this, to get the idea? Where did they get the idea to take a razor and cut off the clitoris? Now, it's not natural. There's no way that a woman would want to harm herself like that. And as I'm watching and looking at some of the research and looking at the patterns, right, because there's life lessons in all of this. As I'm looking at the patterns, and the couple of women, two women in particular stood out to me. Both of them actually really young women that stood out and said, I will not be cut. One young woman just happened to see the procedure being done, and a woman on the table basically butchering another woman with a razor blade. And from a young age, she just got, I'm not doing that. And then another young woman who was excommunicated and shunned from her community and her family. Her school fees weren't paid, nothing, because she refused to be cut. And I was thinking, like, wow, this young woman is really, really brave. And she even asked the interviewer, what are your thoughts about what I'm doing? Because at the end of the day, after the interview, she's alone in standing for what she knows is right. And she's determined to get an education and come back and educate her people about female genital mutilation. But there's definitely a competition for womb space to create workers, to control sex, to control the economy. And are we going to exercise our critical thinking, or is it just too bothersome for us to think about? Would we rather be controlled and not have to think, and put our lives and our thinking and our decision making in the power of a mystery man in the sky, or just leave it up to the universe and not take any proactive actions? Do we just have a desire? Have we just become lazy or mute or numb, to someone else making the decisions? Because it's responsibility. It's a responsibility when you know you have a responsibility to do something. So, interesting, a little while ago, some not Jehovah's Witnesses, these were Mormons, came by and yelling like, hey, I'm like, yeah, how you doing? We'd like to leave a nice message with you about Jesus Christ. I said, yeah, the story has been around for a long time. I'm familiar. Well, it's a very special message, and, two young men with, the uniform, the white shirts and the pants on, if that's their religion. I remember seeing them back in the day in the hood. Every now and then when they come through the hood with their knapsacks on, they're coming there to recruit. And I'm just thinking, it's all this cult activity all over the place, but they pick, who they approach. So they're approaching and they're using these systems because it works. And many of us have the desire, maybe even consciously, we've been trained to want to be controlled so that we just don't have to think, or if we don't know what to do. For example, you don't know what to do in terms of immunization. So what should you do? You know what I'm saying? So a lot of times it becomes so frustrating when you don't maybe have the support, or you're privy to other information that others aren't. You just go along with the group because it's no resistance. It's easy and we don't have to think. So do we have a desire to be controlled? Because there are plenty of folks vying, like, almost on different blocks for, I call them like gang families, or, legal, illegal, religious groups, political groups. Everyone is vying for your attention, your dollars, and your creative energy and your focus and your attention. So I invite folks to take a look at some of the information that's out there on female genital mutilation, because you can see it's a lot of pattern. And one of the things that was interesting, a lot of the men felt that these women weren't women because they were unclean if they hadn't had the surgery. That's built in as a cultural norm. Some of the areas I'm looking at is in Kenya, Malawi, and also Kenya, Malawi. There was another area. So, they felt that the women weren't clean. In some instances, they couldn't get the women's family couldn't get a dowry if she had not had the female genital mutilation done. So it's built in as a societal norm. Many of the grandmothers support it. Many it's elder women that are doing it. But you have to think, where did these practices come from? And now you have some lone, courageous young women, and in some instances, some men that are speaking up against this cultural norm that has become like a religion, something that we do blindly just because it's always been done. When I first found out about the practice of a religious person putting their mouth after a young man, that circumcision as a little boy, when they put their mouth on the little boy's penis, I was in shock. And I had to ask some folks that I knew of this particular religion, is this true? And one woman said, who's pretty modern, her religion said, yeah, it's just it's a little kiss. And I was thinking like, wow, this is cleaning this little baby, and there's even been some cases of this religious person passing on herpes and other diseases to this brand new baby. But that is the religious ritual. So no one challenges it. And if asked any questions, and actually this particular ritual is called mitzvah, MITZ, mitz, BEPH. Look it up. So not looking to offend anyone, just, it is what it is. But we don't question a lot of these dangerous rituals because that's the way it's always been done. And some of the men were commenting, this is our culture. And they, I think, really sincerely wanted to protect their culture. But I invite us to think, in protecting things in our culture, are we also romanticizing and not thinking critically, as it appears, because it's our culture or because it's Black? We won't question, or as an elder, we won't question molestation. We won't investigate a scam. We don't want to speak ill of someone that has made contributions, who's made significant contributions. We can look at several civil rights leaders. One I can think of, what's his name? Was the right hand to Martin Luther King. I can't think of his name right now, but he was having sexual relations with his daughters. He went to jail for it, but he did all this work in civil rights. So we overlook it. So our culture and consciousness has become a lot of religion, and we're really in a time where we're having to we have the opportunity to question these things, and to choose a different path, or we'll continue to want to be accepted by the group and not speak up. So if we look at certain folks that are in political office, we're knowingly putting these people up on pedestals, knowing that their character is questionable. And when we become aware of there's some real, maybe flaws is not an understatement of the word, flaws in character, do we continue to follow this because this flawed character or deviant behavior, because it has a Black face, because it's cultural, because it says kind words? My sister was just mentioning someone that I really, really respect as an elder and historian that was for female genital mutilation. Do we follow someone because they're endeared to us, because they're a parent or a cultural, do we have a need to hold on so bad to something because we want it to be right, that we won't question it? And so that's definitely a pattern that I'm observing in a lot of the young people, and it's just a reflection that are going over to these cults. If I think of, as a woman, from a woman's perspective, I think there's a lot of fear, even with the degrees and stuff, of safety, of not being chosen, of being single, that these women in dysfunctional relationships and wanting to just escape, that folks will choose to be controlled rather than to deal, because there's such fear. This fear of being alone, fear of grades, fear, so much fear, and we are it is not hard to program folks. So I encourage folks to just take a step back when we're looking, and with a lot of the comments, the social media allows folks to just comment from behind a screen, and we may be distracted looking at other people from looking at our own lives, to look at where we're being controlled, or we're in particular other kinds of our flavor cult, our preference, of a cult. Are we overlooking things? It appears that consciousness has become akin to religion. Even eating has become, and foods and raw foods, has become elitist, and has become like a religion, really, and not necessarily looking at the character, of people. So everyone will have to apply their own critical thinking, and this could apply for young women or young men. I really, really encourage folks to take a step back, even from your preferences of who you like, and to look at the big picture. Because at this point, it's beyond skin color. If we think that just because we have um, melanin and great DNA and potential, that we're not capable of deviant behavior or scamming, and we're just going to put the responsibility off because we were exposed to slavery. Is that does that really even make sense? There's no accountability and responsibility for our decision. So it's up to us to mature up and to be responsible and to hold ourselves and hold others accountable. That's going to be us. Because while we're being distracted by all the drama, there's a lot going on. So, do we want to be controlled? Because speaking up a lot of times will mean that you're on your own. You're by yourself. If you choose to speak up because it's worth it for you to speak up rather than just merely be accepted by the group, because now you're in the brotherhood, now you're in the sisterhood, now you're down, now you're black, but you may be, overlooking a lot of behavior, because you're American, or whatever it is, or you're vegan, or you're an athlete. Do we overlook the character of people? That is a definite pattern. We're overlooking the character and making excuses of it on a global scale, but definitely, as a community. And so I said it a long time ago, sometimes it seems so simple, that where these cult leaders get us, and they're very, very savvy, is they know that the average person is not going to address their own contradictions, and they use your religious simple things like your hair or what you're eating, these things, or questions, universal truths that you can't answer. These are some key ways that they lure young people and young women in, because they can't answer these questions or because they don't have a frame of reference. So I don't want to ramble on. It's just something really in looking at some patterns, some definite patterns of behavior, where we're just following things blindly because we want to be accepted. We don't want to be ousted from the group. We don't want to make certain difficult decisions on our own. We don't want to risk being alone. We're scared of getting old and not being in a relationship. All of this fear. There's a lot of human beings on the planet, and will we continue to settle and overlook things because we want to be in the group? That's a decision that lies with all of us. All right. So, hope everyone is well. Create a great day, and be alert. Don't be afraid to. You have the opportunity not to be afraid to call something as you see it, because you want to be accepted by the group.